Alright, I realize it's like almost been a year since this thing has even been on my channel, so we're going to take some time and work on the old Scout today. Let's see, I pulled the steering column because the gearbox and the steering column didn't get along, and then I just didn't really care and just let it sit. So I have been buying parts here and there for it, so I got a lot of parts. I just haven't put anything on there. Got a new heater core. This is the old one that leaks, so we've got a brand new heater core. The water pump leaks, so I got a Scouter 1 brand new water pump here. Heavily built, feels pretty darn solid, so they're really saving our butts on this. We're not sponsored or anything, but it is nice to have some parts. I'm also rebuilding the fuel pump here, and I got all the gaskets except for this one. This is a Unicorn, I suppose, and their kit didn't come with one, but it's more my problem than theirs, because mine is a Frankenstein of a pump, I guess. But anyway, I was thinking of just buying like a $50 Carter, taking the gasket, this gasket out of it, sticking it on there, or I can buy a like parts one of these off of eBay and steal the bottom half of it and then rebuild that, because I got all the stuff for it. I just don't have, you know, the most important thing in order for it to work. Worst case scenario, I just kind of haphazardly put this together, take this off, put a plug in it, and then this is just my vacuum pump for my wipers, and then I run a separate electrical pump for the carburetor. Okay. I have noticed when it did run, it never idled correctly. And I was watching Thunderhead 289. If you guys don't know him, you should go check him out. But oh, there goes the okay. So my throttle right now has a ton of play in it. So this one, the choke one, isn't terrible. Not so much concerned about that one, but this throttle, I mean, that's a good 20, maybe 40 thou worth of wiggle. So even after all the coolant repairs, we're gonna have to pop this carburetor off, and I think we're gonna drill and ream out this for a bushing and then throw that back together again. But that is pretty piss poor right there. Maybe you guys get it better. I mean, if I was more of a nerd, I guess I could put my indicator on there and then we could see how much wiggle we got. But and then after all that, we still can't even steer the thing, so can't even drive it. Oh, I also picked up a fuel filler neck off of like a 94 GMC truck, which I'm going to try to adapt to this. And if you don't know, these have that stupid rubber filler neck that is expensive, and so I'd really like to just have a steel one going into my nice new poly tank. So this thing still doesn't have a fuel system, it just has the old lawnmower gas tank for fuel. So I'm hoping during the spring / summertime I can at least get it functioning again for y'all. So let's start working on it, I guess. Alright, so here's the new heater core, and for those curious, here's the part number for it. Made in Mexico. And what I'm doing is using a bunch of this old roofing tape I got, you know, heat, whatnot, and I'm kind of cushioning each side of it so when I put it in there it's not going to rattle or do anything in my heater box. So we're going to see how this works, and once it heats up it should adhere to it pretty nicely. So we're just kind of fitting that in there, and then we're going to get this heater box in. Long overdue getting the heater box in, and we can finally kind of plumb our coolant lines here. But before I get all that filled up, we're going to have to pull that water pump off and replace that. So that means the whole radiator and all that's going to have to come out anyway. So one thing at a time here. One thing at a time. Alright, so for the fuel pump, I want my surfaces to be flat. So I've got this little granite plate off of eBay, and I think MSC sold it. It was like 60 bucks. I think every shop ought to have a little granite plate like that. Throw some sandpaper on top of it and you can get your surface nice and lapped in here so it has a nice flat surface for the gasket to seal against. I did it to the wiper section here as well as this base gasket here. And I did find a gasket for this. I did wind up buying a electric wiper kit from Scouter One, and in that kit comes a new fuel pump which happens to have the exact gasket I need for the bottom of this. So I'm just going to rob that off of that, and then we're just going to have our vacuum wipers and fuel pump rebuilt here with all new seals. So I'm just flattening the bottom of this. You can see where it's shiny and then where it's dull. So I'm just gonna lap that in and we'll be able to throw her back into the Scout here. Alright, we got the fuel pump installed. Shiny and new. Still a pain in the butt. I'm still running off of the lawnmower tank. I got non-ethanol fancy gas for it. It ran fine with ethanol, but you know, we're gonna spoil some mowers this season, so we got non-ethanol fancy stuff, big dollars. So then I went to put the battery on, and wouldn't you know it, it's dead after sitting for a year. So we're getting it charged up right now. I will probably have to drop the oil after it warms up. I don't think I'll change the filter, but the oil is probably has a little bit of gas left over in it. And then I want to double check and make sure I'm actually getting the oil up to my valve train, because I don't know if I am or not. So we're gonna get into that here. Alright, we got the battery charged and it does run. However, like I said before, the throttle linkage on the carburetor is pretty shot. It doesn't have its steering column in there. That's nice and wet right now. But however, the water pump bearing or the packing is leaking. It's not leaking on the water pump on this gasket here, but it's actually up underneath. There's like a little port, and if coolant starts coming out of that, that means your bearing or the packing is dying in it, and that's what it has now. So it did get nice and warm. I did get the heater installed. That finally doesn't leak, so I can finally have a heater. I know I probably won't be driving it in the cold, but it is nice to have it. This sleeve here was a pain in the butt to install here, but the heater box, you know, nice and pretty. It's not full of rat crap like it was before. I think the motor didn't work, but I think it's because it's not grounded just yet. So I did get the fuel pump working. However, I had to put my mouth on the gas tank and force fuel up into it for it to start working. But now that it works really good, my wipers work really good too, so that's a win-win there. And it shouldn't be dribbling a bunch of oil down in, or shouldn't be dribbling a bunch of gas into my oil, so that's nice to know. Let's see, we got the heater hoses routed. Everything else is okay. I did shoot an offer to a guy on eBay for a whole new steering column, so we'll see. I don't really need the column itself, I need the shaft, because my threads are really boogered on one end, and I don't really feel like fixing it if it's only $100. So let's see what we can get there. Once we get that, then we can throw the steering shaft in, steering column, hook it up to the steering box, which has already piddled out all of its gear oil, which I feel that's why they filled it with grease, which I might have to do again. Then we can finally stick the steering wheel on this thing and get it running. Alright, well, we took the carburetor off, and you can still see the machine marks on the throttle body here, so they must use like a fly cutter or something. But you can still kind of see that. But that's not our concern here. Our concern is the wear on this shaft inside the throttle body. So it still has, it's not as bad as when it was mounted, but there's still quite a bit of wear on either side of that. So our solutions here are to drill and remount the holes and make a bushing out of like Oil-Lite bronze and shove those in there, and then there you go. Other option is to get a new carburetor. These are only like $120 on Amazon for like the really cheapy Chinese knockoff. However, I would very much like to keep this Holley alive, but you can see the wear on that shaft there on either side. So we're gonna see. So I'm not so concerned about the looseness of the choke shaft, because I mean, it's just a choke, you're not going to have it on all the damn time. So not so much concerned about that, more so concerned about our throttle body and any leakage we have, because it can never really idle just right, and that's probably why, along with tuning and all that. But it's hard to tune it if it's got a constant air leak in it. You can't get everything dialed in right. So we're gonna look at some bushings, or how big I gotta drill that out, and then we'll see about either machining some out of, well, either Oil-Lite bronze, or I could probably just do 303 stainless, so it's not brass on brass. So we'll see. Alright, interior wise, I got the bottom blower kind of in. I'm still waiting on the steering shaft, or the steering column, to go in before I plumb all my air hoses to the box there. But looks nice, everything mounted up just fine. The blower motor works, and I have heat, so you know, that's a plus. I'll probably replace that decal This is the driver's side one, and then the passenger side doesn't have a decal on it. It's just plain there. The interior of these is not great, but I mean it's not full of rat poo, so I might kind of dip them in vinegar, but the problem with that is you have to try to match the patina just right, so that might be a little hard to do. We'll see anyway. I did buy a whole new, well, not new, but steering column off of eBay. So that's going to be coming in the mail, and hopefully that one's in better shape than my current one. I tried my best to save it on the threaded end, and I put the nut back on the threads when I was smacking for getting the steering wheel off, but it's just too mangled to try to save. If I was going to save it, I could turn it down, shove a sleeve on it, and have them weld it on one end, and then turn it down to what I want, and then try to rethread it. But for like $112 for an entire steering column with all the innards and everything, we're just going to go with that and see how we do. For the giant gaping hole where I believe a stereo went, I'm not sure. I might just make a cover plate. I don't know. The speaker went right here, and I do have the wiring for the speaker, but I haven't, I don't got anything for a stereo anyway. I know they make those retro ones, which are like outrageously expensive. Might get like a cheapy AM/FM one and throw it in there, just to have it, you know, some tunes while you're driving. But hopefully we can get that set. So I gotta get a new glove box latch. $50 for a glove box latch. Oh well. I lubricated the hinge yesterday, so now it's like really floppy. Anyway, that's interior wise for now. Then the fun part is finding, or remembering, they're both hard, remembering where you put all the bolts, or even if it came with bolts. So that is the plan so far. When it was running, the wipers worked like really great. However, you would pull the ball here, and it would swipe to one side, and then it would just stay there. And I'm pretty sure it cycles back and forth. So I'll have to look into that when we get everything buttoned up. And yeah, that's what's going on here. Alright, here's a drawing for y'all. So our shaft here, on one end we got 275 or 274, the other end's tapering 275 to 273. That 273 is hanging outside of the throttle body itself, so that doesn't really matter too much. So the goal is to make the bushings 275 or 274 on the ID, and then we're going to drill it out to 3/8, 375, and then make the bushings OD 375 to 274 ID, and then make them a 1/2 inch wide and then 3/4 inch wide, and then we'll press them into our body here. So I went and sanded the backside on my little granite block, so that cleaned up pretty good. And I just got to do the same to the other side here. But that is our goal. We're probably going to clamp it in a vise in a mill, and we're going to indicate on this hole, and then we're going to drill down, drill it through. I could probably do a quick and dirty and get a 274 drill, either or a letter or metric or whatever, and just throw it in the hole and then position it in the vise and clamp on it to be quick and dirty. But for this you want to be somewhat accurate since it is your throttle body, so we're going to go with that.
And then after we drill it, we'll throw her into the ultrasonic cleaner to get it nice and squeaky clean. And then push those bushings that I make in it. And we'll probably make them at some 304 stainless or maybe aluminum. One of the two. Whatever's a remnant at work, I suppose, we'll make it out of. So that is the current plan here. Alright, so at work we drilled and reamed out our throttle body here to 371, and then we turned and drilled out our bushings for either side here. So we're gonna put some red Loctite on those and shove them in there, and then our throttle body will fit nice and, or the throttle shaft should fit nice and snugly in our throttle body there. So let's get those in there. This is 303 stainless steel, so it should do us very nicely. Alright, so there's our bushings installed. They fit very nicely. Throttle shaft fits good. I left it the same diameter on this bottom end, so the little plug I can reuse. Just put some Loctite on that and stick it back in place. And then next clip I'll show it all assembled and working for you. Alright, all back together. I put some red Loctite on those little bolts there holding the throttle plate. So now it's got like minimal to nothing for play. So no more vacuum leak there. And when you do this, I used a mill. I suppose you could get away with just throwing it in a vise and drilling it, but it's more precise with a mill, and that way you don't screw up your throttle body. So let me put this back on the carburetor and we'll throw it back on the engine here. Alright, well, we got the carburetor mounted back up, and I discovered that my fuel pump wasn't pumping fuel. And that's because I forgot the spring on the bottom diaphragm. So that was a bit annoying. So we had to pull that fuel pump back off and put the spring back on and throw it back on. And now the fuel pump works so good, it generates so much pressure that it blows right past the needle and seat and causes it to flood. So I'll try to get it started and going here. And you can see the fountain of fuel coming out of that float bowl breather. And I've already taken it off, cleaned the needle and seat. The fuel I'm using is filtered and fresh. There's no dirt in it. If I run it and then I crack that fuel line off the back of that carburetor, it just sprays like no other out the back of it. So I do have a fuel pressure tester coming in the mail tomorrow, so we're going to try that. If it's above 4 psi, I'll probably have to put a restrictor on there and dial back the pressure. But I rebuilt the original because I thought the original pump would be just fine. But now it seems to be like overpressurized, so it's too good now. So let me see if we can get this guy going, and you can hear it run a little bit. I don't have the throttle hooked up, but sometimes it likes choking and other times it doesn't. There it goes. So it just gushes fuel out of it. And then, if I kind of zoom you guys in here, if I crack this guy, I mean, look at that. It's got all the stinking fuel pressure. And when I took the carburetor off, I cleaned out the needle and seat. I turned it upside down. I blew air in it. I couldn't get any air past the needle and seat. So I frankly, the only other option would be the fuel pump is pumping too much. There's no hole in the float. There's nothing obstructing it from doing its job. So that is now the other hang-up we have. But figure this series of clips is kind of long, so I'll stop it here. But thanks for watching, and we'll keep you guys updated here, and we'll see you in the next video. Just to show you how much that fuel pump pushes. So, I mean, we're getting fuel. I don't get it. I guess we'll find out here.